being able to steal information from any sort of database as long as it exists online. And this is truly the only reason that Silva, Zeno, and Kikyo deal with him. Because if he was a Zoldyck who was utterly useless, they would have killed him without a second thought. I mean, Maluki was literally able to recreate the entirety of Greed Island as a game based off a save data given to him by Killua. And this is with little to no mastery of Nen, which Greed Island is associated with. On top of that, he's a very talented inventor, being able to create a micro-sized bomb to be placed on the back of a mosquito that when it bites its intended target, it explodes and kills them. Ideally. Except for the fact that you can't direct a mosquito at a target, and also the bomb was only as powerful as a firecracker. But then again, this bomb was small enough to go on the back of a mosquito, so being able to make it as strong as a firecracker is saying something. When it comes to Nen, Maluki is a manipulator, though we've never technically ever seen him use his Nen abilities. Now this is most likely due in fact to one of two things: the fact that he hasn't left the house in decades, or the fact that he's not that strong in Nen and therefore doesn't really have any ability to show up. However, we do know that he's awakened to Nen and he's able to see Nanika's Nen when she's healing. But since we're talking about people who have abilities we don't really know, next up we have Kikyo. Now Kikyo is the main character of the Silva family, Silva's wife. But don't let her role as a housewife or a mother make you think that she's not an assassin. She absolutely is. But Kikyo's upbringing is a bit different from the rest of the Zoldyck family members. You see, Kikyo was actually born in Meteor City, the place where the majority of the members of the Phantom Troop came from, and where Canary came from. Meteor City is considered a dumping ground in the Hunter x Hunter universe. A place where you can throw anything that you don't want, be that trash, old furniture, or humans. And because of the lawless nature of this area, if you don't become strong quickly, well, you die. Now, as to how Kikyo and Silva met, we technically don't know. We just learned that Kikyo is from Meteor City in a data book, and I also think Goto might have mentioned it once. And this growing up in Meteor City is probably what formed her into the person that she is today. A maniacal assassin who loves the majority of her kids more than anything on Earth, but specifically Killua. Kikyo is absolutely obsessed with her youngest son, so much so that she pushes anybody who ever gets near him away from him so she can have him for herself. And unfortunately, Kikyo's love for the world pretty much runs out with Killua, as we've seen her use innocent people as test subjects for Alika's abilities. The only time Kikyo demands that make sure to say no to any request Alika makes, fully understanding that by saying no to Alika's request, that means Silva would most likely die. And in fact, we know that did die. Both her and her lover Hasam were squished. But hey, at least tonight Kikyo is able to determine that if you say no to Alika's request 4 times, you get squished. Kikyo is also the leader of a family of assassins, which means she wants all of her children to be assassins. Specifically Killua, which is why she gets so happy when Killua acts like an assassin and is cold towards her, which is why she was excited that Killua stabbed her. As far as her abilities, we don't know a huge amount about them. This is largely due to the fact that she was born in Meteor City, where no records are kept. The only time we've ever really seen her in pseudo combat is when she knocked out Canary, but she did that just by firing a projectile from her fan. We don't know if that's tied into her abilities at all. We do know that just like the last person on this list, though, her Nen type is manipulation, which makes sense because she's been trying to do that to Killua for years. Fortunately for us, Kikyo is the last person on this list whose abilities we don't fully understand. Next up, we have Kaluto. I'm gonna go with Kaluto. See, Kaluto is the youngest member of the Zoldyck family currently. In that they, and I'm gonna use they, them pronouns for Kaluto because we don't necessarily know whether or not they are a man or a woman. For reference on this, Alika is a transgender woman, and Kaluto, while being born a man, does wear a kimono of a woman, so it might be the same circumstance as Alika. So they, to be polite. Kaluto, to me at least, is one of the most interesting members of the Zoldyck family. Critically underexplained, critically misunderstood, and critically not understood. Kaluto is the only member of the Zoldycks to ever enter the Phantom Troop. They joined the Phantom Troop to replace Hisoka, and thus became the number 4 member of the Phantom Troop. Now, mind you, they are younger than Killua, who was around 13 years old during the timeline of Hunter x Hunter. That is to say that Kaluto is most likely somewhere in the range of 10 years old, and was strong enough to join the Phantom Troop. And while admittedly Kaluto is not one of the stronger members of the Phantom Troop, just joining is enough. Kaluto is incredibly faithful to the Zoldyck family, almost constantly being seen clutching onto the side of Kikyo. And unfortunately from Kikyo, they picked up a side of sadism. A side of sadism that makes them drag out fights against weaker opponents so they can torture them. But can we necessarily be surprised by this? Before they even joined the Phantom Troop, they accompanied Illumi and Maha in the assassination of the 10 Dons. 10 Mafia crime bosses who would put massive bounties on the Phantom Troop's heads. So at the age of 10, not only were they assassinating the hunters that were protecting the 10 Dons, they were also killing incredibly high-level, very important mafiosos. However, it wasn't until they joined the Phantom Troop that we truly got to see their abilities. See, Kaluto was actually probably the most talented user of Zetsu in the entire Zoldyck family. They were able to spy Gon Karakun Leorio completely unnoticed. Also able to appear before Linov and Franklin completely unnoticed, distract them for a couple of seconds, and then disappear, showing that they could elude the Phantom Troop if they wanted. Something Gon and Killua couldn't do against weaker members of the Phantom Troop, mind you. In fact, the only person who's ever been able to pick up on Kaluto's Zetsu was Hisoka, who's arguably top 5 strongest people in Hunter x Hunter. Their Zetsu is so complete that Kaluto was able to keep surveillance on Phantom Troop members in the Zazan Palace in Meteor City without the Phantom Troop members noticing. In order to accomplish this, Kaluto used their Nen ability, surveillance paper dolls, where essentially Kaluto as a manipulator can place a piece of confetti on a person they want to observe. And then after creating a paper doll of that person, they can hear what's ever happening around the person they've made the paper doll of. And the stealth of this technique is so absolute, people like Phaeton didn't know it was being used on them. But if you do push Kaluto into a fight, they also have incredibly powerful offensive techniques.
Smokey!
Assassination of the $10. 10 mafia crime bosses who would put massive bounties on the Phantom Troops' heads. So at the age of 10, not only were they assassinating the hunters that were protecting the 10 Dons, they were also killing incredibly high-level, very important mafiosos. However, it wasn't until they joined the Phantom Troop that we truly got to see their abilities. See, Kaluto was actually probably the most talented user of Zetsu in the entire Zoldyck family. They were able to spy on Gon Karakun Leorio completely unnoticed. They were also able to appear before Bonolinov and Franklin completely unnoticed, distract them for a couple of seconds, and then disappear, essentially showing that they could elude the Phantom Troop if they wanted. Something Gon and Killua couldn't do against weaker members of the Phantom Troop, mind you. In fact, the only person who's ever been able to pick up on Kaluto's Zetsu was Hisoka, who's arguably top 5 strongest people in Hunter x Hunter. Their Zetsu is so complete that Kaluto was able to keep surveillance on Phantom Troop members in the Zazan Palace in Meteor City without the Phantom Troop members noticing. In order to accomplish this, Kaluto used their Nen ability, surveillance paper dolls. As a manipulator, can place a piece of confetti on a person they want to observe. And then after creating a paper doll of that person, they can hear what's ever happening around the person they've made the paper doll of. And the stealth of this technique is so absolute, people like Phaeton didn't know it was being used on them. But if you do push Kaluto into a fight, they also have incredibly powerful offensive techniques. Outside of the fact that Kaluto carries a fan with them that is able to cut through steel rope, they also have an ability called Dance of the Serpent's Bite. This technique also uses confetti, and essentially by making a massive wind current with their fan, Kaluto creates a tunnel of confetti in a tornado-like shape that can pull people to pieces. Imagine Byakuya Kuchi's Bankai, and the way that it creates a million blades that slice you to death slowly and painfully. This is essentially a tornado of paper cuts, of paper that can cut through steel. And it's actually implied on top of all of this in Greed Island that the Phantom Troop wouldn't have been able to find the Nen Exorcist without Kaluto. That's implying that Kaluto has some kind of extrasensory perception that allows them to find whoever they're looking for. Now, this next entry on the list is going to make a couple of people upset. And I'd like to say that this next entry on the list is made with a big old caveat. You see, because the next entry on our list is Killua. Yeah, he's fourth from the bottom in terms of strength of all the Zoldycks that we know. But the big caveat here, because I can already hear people screaming it in the back, is that this is his strength without the help of Alika/Nanika.
But Nick, with the power of Alika and Nanika, he can basically achieve anything he wants because he can make her do whatever he wants.
Yes, I'm aware that technically he's like boundless with Alika and Nanika's help. But we're talking about his strength, and well, obviously the way that he treated Alika and Nanika and
Whatever he wants.
Yes, I'm aware that technically he's like boundless with Alika and Nanika's help. But we're talking about his strength, and well, obviously the way that he treated Alika and Nanika is a big part of his personality, and therefore could be considered a part of his strength. It's too not concrete. So just based off of Killua's strength, experiences, abilities, all of that, it's right here on the list. See, Killua is our first and probably only entry on the list of people who don't really buy into the Zoldyck family. You see, because a big part of being in the Zoldyck family is believing that the Zoldyck family is the most important entity on Earth. However, because Killua doesn't really buy into the whole family aspect, he abandons the family after stabbing his mother and goes to become a hunter. And if he was to be hypothetically successful in this endeavor of becoming a hunter, he would have been the sort of first Zoldyck family member to become a hunter. Obviously, sort of first because Illumi was taking the test with him. But just because Killua isn't as faithful to the Zoldyck family as everyone else does not mean that he didn't pick up on the whole sadism, murderous side. You see, because on a surface level, Killua seems like a happy-go-lucky kind of kid. Kind of kid who spent $200 million on chocolate. When it boils down to it, he is as Zoldyck as anybody else, being able to tap into an almost bottomless well of murderous rage. And while as the show progresses, see less and less of this murderous rage, Killua is never afraid to tap into it. Like during the Hunter exam, when he ripped a man's heart out of his chest, placed it in a bag, and then handed it back to him. Or like during the Heaven's Arena arc, when he threatened to murder the 3 people on level 200 that were threatening Gon. See, Killua as a co-antagonist of the show is meant to act as a foil to Gon. And as Killua becomes more and more of a human, Gon is supposed to descend further and further into darkness. And that's truly what I believe everyone loves about Killua as a whole. And we'll do a you-know-nothing about Killua at some point. But more than just the darkness, Killua also has to confront his fear of fighting people stronger than him. You see, Killua is one of the very few non-manipulators in the Zoldyck fam, being a transmuter himself. His older brother Illumi is a manipulator and has the ability to brainwash people by putting a needle in their brain. And therefore, more than overcoming the darkness in his heart, Killua also had to confront the manipulation and brain control that Illumi had him under to make sure that he never entered a battle he couldn't absolutely win. And it wasn't until the Chimera Ant arc that Killua finally underwent this battle and won. And once Killua undoes this brainwashing, his abilities get maxed out. See, Killua is a Zoldyck through and through, which means that he was raised to be an assassin from the second he was born. Which means that even without the use of Nen, he had insane strength, speed, durability, and resistances to things like electricity and poison. In fact, before Killua even learned Nen, he was able to open 4 out of 7 testing gates at the Zoldyck compound. That is to say, he pushed aside 16 tons. Wait, no, sorry. I thought the first door weighed 2 tons, not 4. It's actually only the third door. 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, which is what Killua opened after he learned Nen. And speaking of things that Killua did before Nen, he was able to rip out Jonas' heart, the serial killer, from the Hunter exam, so quickly that the serial killer didn't even realize that the heart had been pulled out. That was all before Killua learned Nen. See, the beauty of Hunter x Hunter is that Togashi gives us actual numbers that equal speed and strength. We basically have a number to understand Killua's speed. See, Killua is fast enough to dodge a bullet. Said bullet is fired at least 57 meters away from Killua. 57 centimeters is just shy of 2 feet. This isn't even just some average bullet. This is a high velocity bullet. So Killua's perception is speed is so a number to understand Killua's speed. See, Killua is fast enough to dodge a bullet, as long as said bullet is fired at least 57 meters away from Killua. 57 centimeters is just shy of 2 feet. And this isn't even just some average bullet. This is a high velocity bullet. So Killua's perception is speed is so fast that he can see a bullet being fired at him from 2 feet away and dodge it. And this speed has helped him to accomplish innumerable feats, like the fact that he knocked out 1,400 Hunter examinees in less than 45 minutes. In fact, he knocked out all of these examinees so quickly he said it took him longer to collect their badges than anything else. Lucky for these wannabe hunters, Killua didn't even use the majority of his techniques. See, there's an ability passed down through certain members of the Zoldyck family. The ability to manipulate your body. That is the ability to change your hand into a weapon. See, Killua's passed down the ability to make his nails sharper than knives. That's only if Killua actually wants you to see him coming. See, the only time that we've actually ever technically heard Killua's footsteps is when Gon was Jaja kenning Pito into oblivion. That's actually real. Go back and watch Hunter x Hunter. You'll never hear Killua's steps until he's running after Gon. On top of that, Killua has access to the ability Rhythm Echo, which allows him to walk at such a pace that he leaves physical after images of himself so you don't know which one is attacking. And like I said earlier, amongst the Zoldicks, he's actually kind of rare because he's not a manipulator, he's a transmuter, which means his techniques revolve around changing the shape and properties of the aura. In his circumstance, it's lightning. But when it comes to Nen, Killua is a genius. And not even just a genius amongst geniuses. You see, when Killua went to the dodgeball game on Greed Island, Bisky said that he was able to redistribute his aura with a 1% margin of error. That is to say that he could use Ryu almost perfectly. Ryu, for those of you who haven't seen my Nen Explain video, is the process of using Gyo and Ken simultaneously. Gyo meaning that you concentrate your aura in a singular place, and Ken being an upgraded version of Ten, aka a defensive shrouding of Nen around your entire body. Bisky, who is a 1-star hunter, mind you, said that she did not accomplish this ability until she was late in her 20s. But we're not going to talk about Ryu when it comes to Killua. We have to talk about his lightning abilities. See, when Killua transmutes his aura into lightning, he can use it in multiple different kinds of ways. He can use Lightning Palm, which coats his palms in lightning that he uses to shock his opponent. He can use Thunderbolt, which combines transmutation with emission as he throws a Thunderbolt at his opponent. But even that isn't what we really want to talk about, right? We want to talk about Godspeed. Well, Godspeed has two applications: Whirlwind and Speed of Lightning. First, we're going to talk about Whirlwind because it's going to be the more interesting of the two applications. See, let's say hypothetically, you throw a tennis ball at me. There's a couple of things I could do in this circumstance. I could dodge the tennis ball, or I could catch the tennis ball. And if I fail to do either of those things, I'll take a tennis ball straight to the face. Now, in order to do either of those things, a couple things need to happen. One, I need to see the tennis ball. Two, my brain needs to tell my nerves to tell my muscles to move in order to either catch this ball or dodge this ball. And that entire processes of things happening takes time. Time that could result in a tennis ball hurtling into my face. Now imagine we're not talking about tennis balls. We're talking about bullets. You don't really have a lot of time, and you really don't want that bullet to the face. Killua cuts this time out by cloaking his entire body in his lightning aura. That is to say that he instructs his aura to automatically react to outside stimuli. And since the lightning that covers his body acts as a neural pathway, it can move his muscles without his brain having to step in. Meaning that technically he doesn't have to see or even register anything around him. His body will simply just react to external stimuli and move on its own. And since Killua's aura is programmable, he can program it to react to certain different things. And because conditional Nen becomes even stronger, by programming his Nen to react to things specific to a certain person, gives Killua an even further boost in speed, which is why he was able to strike Yubi, one of the royal guards, multiple times without Yubi really having anything to do about it. Technically being able to give an order to Nen is a manipulation ability, so Whirlwind actually could be used in the ability of God is lightning. While this makes some people believe lightning, unfortunately, we know that Killua covered a distance of 40 kilometers in 10 minutes, meaning that through very bad terrain, albeit he moved at 240 kilometers per hour. About 150 miles per hour. Now, if he was on better terrain, like a paved road or flat space, and he could probably move faster than this. People highball him at around 500 miles per hour, which is just drastically slower than lightning. And for that reason, and that reason alone, Killua is this low on the list. After Killua is his older brother and one of my least favorite characters in the entirety of Hunter x Hunter, Illumi. You see, Illumi truly lives up to the manipulator Nenta. Oh, I'm dumb. Earlier I said Kabuto is the only member who joined the Phantom Troop. Illumi obviously replaces Ryuben. Illumi is the oldest child of Silva and Kikyo, and he, like many other members on this list, is very proud of his Zoldyck family. So much so that he played a very active part in the raising of Killua into an elite assassin. And also aware of Killua's potential, Illumi is very invested in Killua becoming the best assassin he can be. This is something that Silva, Killua and Illumi's father, is also very aware of. Therefore, Silva actually directed some potential of Killua into an elite assassin. the oldest child of Silva and Kikyo, and he, like many other members on this list, is very proud of his Zoldyck family. So much so that he played a very active part in the raising of Killua into an elite assassin. And because Illumi is so aware of Killua's potential, Illumi is very invested in Killua becoming the best assassin he can be. This is something that Silva, Killua, and Illumi's father is also very aware of. Therefore, Silva actually directed Illumi to place a Nen needle in Killua's brain while he was young, making sure that he would flee from any battle he knew could not win, thus guaranteeing Killua's safety. Illumi is the physical representation of being your brother's keeper, because not only was he tasked with the task of making sure that Killua would never fight anybody stronger than him, after Killua flees the Zoldyck mansion, Illumi is sent to keep an eye on him in the Hunter exam, and Illumi is able to do this because of his Nen ability. See, Illumi's Nen ability revolves entirely around needles. Specifically, 3 different sets of needles that once imbued with Nen act differently. See, Illumi's first set of needles, when imbued with Nen, can change his or somebody else's appearance. Simply by placing these needles imbued with Nen into certain places in his or somebody else's body, it can change how they look entirely. New height, new bone structure, everything. Illumi's second set of needles is the needle that he used to brainwash Killua. It's a thinner needle that when placed in somebody's brain can set a predetermined condition, like don't fight people stronger than you. And Illumi's third set of needle is the needle that he uses to create needle people. These needles, when placed in the skull of a person, allow Illumi to control them. Essentially, if Illumi gets this needle in your skull, he gets to control you like a person playing an RPG. But Illumi doesn't even need to resort to the use of his needles half of the time he's in combat. See, when Illumi was sent to dispatch of the 10 Dons, there was 40 hunters there protecting the 10 Dons. Illumi killed all of them before they could even ask for help. And even if you do get your hands on Illumi, Gon quite literally broke his arm and Illumi didn't even break a sweat. But if he does get serious, things get scary. As a manipulator, Illumi can do a bunch of crazy things. You see, Illumi can alter his appearance without needles. Basically, whatever he wants to look like, he can. However, by using needles, he's able to hold the form for longer. Illumi can also control corpses. If Illumi places multiple needles in the head of a corpse, he can control them just like he could with his needles. These corpses can talk, drive, fight, do anything. But the thing that Illumi uses more than anything is needle people. Now, the control that Illumi has over needle people is usually less than corpse control. And this is because corpse control takes more needles and more time to set up. But with needle people, Illumi can basically just take one Nen imbued needle and shove it into somebody's head. This Nen is imbued with a somewhat basic command. Chase Killua.
Come here.
Things run in circles. And these needle people will do that task until they either die or pass out from exhaustion. But if Illumi uses more needles, like 2 or 3, these needle people can do more complex tasks, like drive or speak. And if the fact that he can build an army of zombies at basically any point isn't scary enough, he's also Hisoka's boyfriend. So I wouldn't piss him off. His real relationship with Hisoka has never been officially confirmed, but come on. But you know whose relationship is even more confusing than Hisoka and Illumi's? Silva's with Killua. And that's next on our list. Silva. Silva's the current head of the Zoldyck family, the son of Zeno, and the father of basically everyone else. Silva, just like his wife Kikyo, has love for Killua and wants him to be an elite assassin. So much so that he named Killua the next heir to the Zoldyck family. See, Silva might seem like the unproblematic king of the Zoldyck family. But let's not forget that he was the person who told Illumi to put a needle in Killua's brain. And also only let Killua go out on his adventure with Gon because he saw it as a crucial step in Killua becoming the heir to the Zoldyck family. But Silva's terrifying. Legitimately. He was once set out on a mission to kill a member of the Phantom Troop, and he did that. And upon killing this member of the Phantom Troop, Silva had to fight Chrollo by himself. This is not the time that he fought Chrollo with his father there, and this fight ended in a stalemate. And this makes sense because everything we've heard about Silva and everything we've seen from him is crazy. Killua stated that he can rip a man's heart out of his chest without a singular drop of blood, which should just be impossible. That's where the blood is. It's the superhighway of blood. Crush Cheeto's head in one blow. That's Chimera and Captain. Not to mention, Silva's body is so hardened that traditional blades can't cut it. And it's not even just his skin. His hair is so strong it can be used as a tourniquet. But Silva, like Killua, is a transmuter. And also like Killua, he can transmute his aura and then emit it away from his body like Killua's Thunderbolt. Except, Silva's is a bit scarier. You see, Silva's transmission and emission ability are just called explosive orbs, and these explosive orbs are so powerful that they could kill Chrollo and Zeno in one hit. That is to say that Zeno's plan was to hold Chrollo down, while Silva threw these explosive orbs at both of them, and that would kill both of them. The explosion is said to be able to level entire buildings in one go. And if big old explosive balls don't scare you, well, Silva is also a master enhancer, which makes sense because transmuters can use enhancement techniques at 80% efficiency. But enough about Silva, let's talk about his dad, Zeno Zoldyck, a witty, angry man who wears a necklace that says 1 kill every day. You know, so you don't lose your edge. Zeno is through and through the strong old man stereotype. And honestly, if anything, he might be the unproblematic king of the Zoldyck family. Zeno truly only really ever kills when he has a contract to do so. While he shows no remorse for the people he's killing, that's still pretty good as far as Zoldicks go. Also, he's big on not injuring innocents. We saw this when we saw his dragon descent actually injure Komogi. And upon realizing he had hurt an innocent, he lost all interest in the battle and basically just dipped. Now, was this due to the fact that this was the first time he ever hurt an innocent in his entire career and therefore he felt shame? Or the fact that he's really, really dedicated to not injuring innocents? It could be both, but either way, that's a moral system, and as far as assassins go, that's pretty rare. But he's got a lot more than morals. He has an insane amount of strength. His durability is hilarious. He literally fell for 2 kilometers and landed like it was a 2-foot jump. There's also the fact that Zeno's probably one of the best close quarter fighters we've seen in all of Hunter x Hunter. He was able to put Chrollo on the defensive, draw blood from Chrollo, and hold Chrollo down so that Silva could destroy the both of them. Zeno, just like Silva and Killua, is a transmuter. And just like with Silva, he's very talented in a mission, which is difficult as a transmuter because you're only able to use emission techniques at 60% efficiency, which is insane because some of his aura constructs can exist while they're kilometers away from him. Mind you, emission techniques get weaker as they're further from their host. And this is mostly due to the fact that Zeno is probably one of the most talented Nen users in all of Hunter x Hunter's history. See, a master of Nen is able to create N that's about 50 meters around them. N, for those of you who don't remember, is a bubble of Nen you create around yourself so you can react to anything that comes within said bubble. That is a master of Nen. Zeno said he could go to 300 meters. That is roughly 1,000 feet in all directions, 360. But how do his techniques manifest? Well, Zeno likes to transmute his aura into a dragon, specifically with an ability called Dragon Head. This makes his aura a tangible extension of his body that he can fire at opponents. And he can disconnect it from his body using his emission techniques and make it kind of like a dragon bolt. He can also use this ability to fly or have other people fly, which is insane. See, with this Dragon Head ability, he not only flew him and Netero to the NGL, but he also flew Netero and Meruem a far enough distance away from the mansion in the NGL so their fight wouldn't hurt anybody, which is an emission technique used at a high level, kilometers away from himself. He can then use Dragon Head to use 2 different abilities, Dragon Lance and Dragon Dive. Dragon Lance works a bit like Goku's Kamehameha wave. Essentially, by launching his aura in the form of this dragon, he can control it with his hand. That is to say, he can precisely aim where it's gonna go and have it latch onto an opponent. And Dragon Dive is what happens when Zeno breaks up his dragon head into hundreds of little Nen dragon shards. These dragon shards destroyed almost everything in the Chimera Ant Palace and the outside walls. That is to say that this Dragon Dive acts like a mortar system that can cover almost a square mile. And while pro hunters and Chimera Ants can block these things or dodge them relatively easily, against fodder, it's insanely powerful. But since we're talking insanely powerful, we now have to talk about some Zoldicks that we assume are insanely powerful because of what they've been said to do. We don't really know their abilities. So unfortunately, we're beginning to venture into hypothetical territory. And since we're talking about Zeno, it's only appropriate that we talk about Zeno's father, Zig Zoldyck. See, we know very, and I mean very little about Zig Zoldyck. In fact, we know more about Zig Zoldyck's father than we know about Zig Zoldyck. What we do know about Zig Zoldyck, though, is the fact that he went to the Dark Continent, specifically with Netero while Netero was still young. And Zig Zoldyck returned from the Dark Continent unharmed. See, going to the Dark Continent pretty much has a 99% mortality rate. And if you don't die there, you bring something horrific back with you. Specifically, every single excursion to the Dark Continent has brought back one of the 5 threats. These are incredibly terrifying diseases or monsters that return with the people who went to the Dark Continent and terrorize the V6 nations. I know it's the V5 nations, but like in the manga now it's V6. So the fact that Zeno Zoldyck managed to return from the Dark Continent with Netero with no damage and none of the calamities speaks to an insane amount of power. Though I do technically have a theory that they were the expedition that brought back Ai, because that would explain how Ai ended up in Aluka. That is, if you subscribe to the theory that Nanika is actually Ai, because instead of saying hi, which is Japanese for yes, she says I, which I think is an absolute banger of a theory and you should probably agree with me. But for the purposes of this video, we're gonna assume that theory is not correct because it kind of dismantles my whole argument that they didn't come back with any of the calamities. Moving on, the next entry on our list is Zig Zoldic's father, Maha. He's so old. He's Killua's great-grandfather. Wait, let me do the math. We got Killua, and then we have Silva, and then we have Zeno, and then we have Zig, and then we have Maha. 2 greats, 3 greats, it's a lot of greats. I mean, this man is over 120 years old. And since he's 120 years old, that means that he's roughly the same age as Isaac Netero, the second strongest person in Hunter x Hunter. And a little caveat that we learned about Maha Zoldyck is that the only person that he ever fought that survived was Isaac Netero. And that's how they worded it. Not the only person Maha ever lost to, not the person that ever gave Maha a good fight. The only person that ever fought Maha and survived was Isaac Netero. And not 120-year-old Isaac Netero, prime power, full net abilities, Isaac Netero. A man who at 120 killed Meruem, sorta. Unfortunately, that's basically all we know about Maha Zoldyck. That, and he's the only Zoldyck who's primarily an enhancer, which would actually explain how long he's been alive. But also, enhancement is said to be the strongest of all the net affinities, outside of specialist, obviously, which could explain the fact that he possibly beat Netero in a fight. But there is somebody who could beat Netero in a fight, and that's our last entry on this. Yes, you guessed it, ladies and gentlemen, it's Alika. Well, actually, technically, it's not Alika, it's Nanika, because Alika herself doesn't have Nen. See, Alika herself is a very unassuming child. She's the second youngest child of the Zoldyck family, and she loves her big brother, Killua. However, Alika shares a telepathic connection with an entity from the continent, which we assume to be one of the 5 calamities brought back through the V5 expeditions to the Dark Continent. However, because Alika technically shares a body with Nanika, she's got a couple of pretty weird abilities.
Come here.
See, Alika likes to ask
Get on the bed.
questions. Furthermore, Alika likes to ask people to do things for her. And these questions can range from
Good boy.
"Hey, you pick up that piece
Good
of gum,"
boy.
to hand me your liver. Should a person accomplish 3 of these tasks, Alika will turn into Nanika, and Nanika will grant said person the calamities brought back through the V5 expeditions to the Dark Continent. However, because Alika technically shares a body with Nanika, she's got a couple of pretty weird abilities. See, Alika likes to ask people questions. Furthermore, Alika likes to ask people to do things for her. And these questions can range from, hey, can you pick up that piece of gum for me, to hand me your liver.
Hand me your liver. Holy shit, that is pretty dark. That's pretty dark, low key.
The person accomplishes 3 of these tasks.
Shit, I'm tired as
Alika will
fuck.
turn into Nanika, and Nanika will grant said person a wish. Mind you, what these wishes can accomplish is said to possibly be boundaries. Killua states that he's wishing for all different kinds of things, and he assumes that Nanika is able to grant quite literally any wish. The only problem with granting any kind of wish is that the more severe the wish Nanika grants, well, the worse it is for the next person who tries to get a wish. Let's say that hypothetically I complete 3 of Alika's requests, and then I wish for $1 billion. The next person who tries to make a wish will have to complete some of Nanika's incredibly grueling asks, like pull out each one of your fingernails or give me your liver. But here's the thing, after you've completed one of Nanika's asks, well, you're in trouble. Because let's say the 4th ask isn't so bad. Maybe it's shave your boot, so I shave it. But the next ask is hand me your kidneys. If I say no to 4 tasks in a row, I die. But not only I die. See, because depending on the severity of the wish prior to mine, people that I know and or people that I spend the most time with will die. If the wish prior to mine was something like give me a hug, then me and the person that I spend the most time with will die. However, if the wish before mine was something like give me $1 billion, not only I, but everyone that I've known for even a small amount of time gets squished. Now, there's a bunch of other rules that the Zoldicks have painstakingly figured out without, but I've already gone over all those rules in other videos, so I'm not going to go into it right now. Basically, all you need to know is that because Killua and Alika love each other so much, Killua is able to make requests of Alika and Nanika. That is to say that none of the rules apply to him, and Killua can basically ask Alika and Nanika for anything he wants. $1 billion, Meruem dead, him and Gon to be best friends for the rest of their lives. Kill doesn't like to do this because he doesn't like to feel like he's using Alika. But that doesn't change the meat of what we're talking about here. Alika and Nanika have the ability to do anything. For all we know, Alika/Nanika collapse the star that keeps the planet Hunter x Hunter is located on. War. Alika and Nanika hypothetically could just delete existence. We don't know the bounds of what they can accomplish. And while technically this power is not something that they can manifest on their own, with the help of Killua, hypothetically they can use Nanika to accomplish anything. And because of that, Alucard is our unequivocal top spot. But what do you guys think? Do you guys feel as though I played in their correct spots? Do you feel like
Stupid fucking
tell me in the comments below, and while you guys are there,
neck hurts.
listen, there are a lot of reasons that I consider Hunter x Hunter to be the greatest anime ever created. The world building, the lack of plot holes, the lovable characters, but more importantly than anything, the incredibly diverse and rich power system. Listen, there are entire pages of college-level explanations explaining how you can exactly determine who will win the battle using AP and SP in an equation given to us by Togashi, on top of incredibly rich explanations of the 6 different types of Nen users and how they can apply those Nen types to different types of techniques, and how separate subcategories of Nen play into different Nen techniques and how those give you advantages in battle. When it comes to power systems, there is no power system as complicated, yet as fleshed out as Nen. Which is why when you want to talk about things like the 15 strongest Nen techniques, kind of an uphill battle. Because within the confines of such a complicated power system, a lot of different things can be gauged as power. There's incredibly potent defensive Nen techniques, offensive Nen techniques, healing Nen techniques, sealing Nen techniques. We have brand new Nen techniques being introduced every single week in the manga with spiritual Nen beasts. And we still haven't even made it to the Dark Continent, where I'm sure Nen will be completely rewritten once again. But just because it's uphill sledding doesn't mean I'm not gonna do it. Like cat for that. So today, we're gonna be talking about the 15 strongest Nen techniques in Hunter x Hunter. Specifically, the offensive capabilities granted by said techniques. So you won't see anything like Pakunoda's Spirit Bomb or the abilities of the Nen Exorcist. While those techniques are incredibly important to the storyline and very useful offensively, they don't add up to much. So today, we're just talking about the stuff that packs a punch. So now that we have the rules set for this list, let's go ahead and get into the list. And the 15 strongest Nen techniques in Hunter x Hunter, ranked and explained. But before we get to ranking and explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, hit that noti bell. Nen techniques. Even when you're only considering the offensive power of an Nen technique, it's incredibly hard to rank them. Because while other power systems like chakra or bending rely on elemental releases, Nen techniques rely on the difference in how Nen is used. Who's to say that an enhancement technique is necessarily stronger than a manipulation technique? And while enhancement techniques have been called the perfect blend of offense and defense, some of the strongest abilities we've seen in the entirety of Hunter x Hunter have been things like transmuter techniques or emitter techniques, not to mention specialist techniques. But with all that in mind, I am going to try my hardest here to give you the most coherent ranking of Nen techniques ever created. But no promises. But with the caveats out of the way, let's get jumping into this list with number 15, Yezola. I know, it's insane that the lowest ability on this list is one of the key abilities of one of the Royal Guard, but when considering the strength of the Royal Guard, their real strength comes in, well, their strength, and also their speed and intelligence in Nen output. I believe Yuppie is the best example of this. While Yuppie's enhancement ability to change the form of his body to grow wings or additional arms is incredibly cool, when considered against a myriad of different Nen abilities, it's arguably not that strong. Instead, Yuppie's true strength comes from his raw strength, his speed, his reactions, and his Nen output. Now, I wouldn't say that's exactly the case for Poof, though it could be argued, and I would be one to argue it, that Poof is the weakest of the Royal Guard. His Nen abilities are arguably some of the more interesting in the show. And while he